Where do you stand with Marine Nationale? He doesn't seem to, like, there's very few people that sit on the fence. Hello and welcome back to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel in association with Racing TV. Another really good episode planned for you this week. If you watched last week's episode, you'd have seen that Josh is off in America now this week. He was at the Breeders' Cup last weekend. He's enjoying himself for a couple of weeks, but we've got a more than able deputy in the case of Gavin Lynch. Gavin, it's great to have you back on with us. We had you just before the season started in earnest. We've now had, I suppose, a month's worth of jumps action. Have you been enjoying getting back stuck into it?
Yeah, it's great. Sure, once you've done Royal out of the way, you're certainly in the thick of it. Is Josh gone on a working holiday or kind of mostly?
Oh no, we're very much pleasure holiday. He's just completely, he's down tools from the jump season. We've been talking about it for 5 months, and yet immediately it starts, he's gone. Yeah.
And who's he gone there with? A few lads or?
Oh no, he's gone with his mother. He's getting the full treatment and everything.
Right. So just to make sure he doesn't have to spend any money.
Exactly. Good life for some.
Yeah. Look, it's great to have the National Hunt back. As we say, you know, I love the summertime. I don't particularly enjoy the wintertime, but we've got the Premiership. Liverpool are going well, which is good. And then we've got the National Hunt racing. So apart from that, I don't think we've too much to watch. So it's brilliant to have the good guys back, as you might call them, the National Hunt horses. And, you know, like if you look, we'll go through down Royal and stuff in a few minutes. But the one thing about the flat's great. I'm not complaining, but you don't get characters like you get with Envoy Allen, no. Hewick and those ones. Like for Envoy Allen to come back and do it year after year after year is amazing, isn't it? It's like he's just such a fantastic horse. He had a bit of a blip that time when he changed stables, and that's the way it just panned out. But since then, he's a remarkable horse. He's not quite in the class of a Cato Star, etc., etc. But geez, he's a lovely horse, isn't he?
Yeah, he's absolutely super. And when you see, I suppose, like City of Troy's the horse on everyone's lips at the moment, and we're never going to see him again now. He's gone.
Yeah, and even, you know, Hewick, you know, you get used to him. He runs some okay races, and then he wins in America, and then he wins the King George, and the story with Shark, and it's just, you end up, it's almost like you own 1% of these horses yourself, you know. So it's to have the National Hunt back is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely fantastic. During this episode, I suppose we're going to look down through the winners through Down Royal, potentially one or two horses that appeared on the scene before Down Royal, and then we're going to cast our eye towards Sunday, especially at Naas, where there's some interesting entries. So make sure, if you do enjoy this video, please do give it a like down below and subscribe to the channel. Let's hopefully try and hit 500 likes if we can, and if you do have the time to hit that subscribe button, please go and do so. We're actually very much nearing 20,000 subscribers, and we've got a decent thing planned for when we hit that 20,000 seater stadium. So we'll hopefully end up getting there sooner rather than later. But we'll get into Down Royal, and as you mentioned, MYLN, we'll start with him. Gavin, interesting race. Hewick really set it up, a fantastic jumping or a front-running ride from Jordan Gainford on him. But MYLN, he nearly did it last year in the same race, but he got his head in front this time around.
Yeah, no, he was super. He travelled really, really well. He jumped superbly. Look, it was a fantastic finish. You thought Hewick maybe was getting back up on the far side. Brilliant commentary that I heard to finish the race. I suppose Jerry Callan was certainly the disappointing one of the race. At the time, I thought he jumped terribly. I went and looked at all the replays again today, as I do, and I just thought actually his jumping wasn't as bad as I thought. He made a terrible mistake 6 out, but apart from that, his jumping wasn't too bad, but he just never travelled. I'd say he's a horse that maybe the ground was too quick. Now, we had some decent runs on reasonable ground before, and when you see a horse win twice at Aintree, you think that they can travel fine. He just never really travelled. He was beaten 13 lengths. He'll have to improve hugely at Christmas time if he's going to become a Gold Cup candidate again, but he's lots to prove after that the other day.
Yeah, and I know you're the type of person with certain ages of horses going forward you wouldn't necessarily back. What's your stance on those horses that have, I suppose, have run in Gold Cups, being beaten? It's not a trend that often works out to go back and win the race again.
Yeah, I suppose Cato Star is the last one to regain the crown. But yeah, Jerry Callan was 8 turn 9. Obviously, Envoy Allen is 10 turn 11. So where Envoy Allen is going to end up, maybe he could go to the King George, could go back to the Ryanair. Jerry Callan, just is he quick enough to win a Gold Cup? We saw when he ran the Brown Advisory, he got tap for toe coming down the hill. He gets chinned to a lot of people's heartbreak. A lot of people complain about the jockey that day, but I tend not to complain too much about jockeys. It's usually the horse's inability. He's a fantastic horse, Jerry Colombe. He's got a great winning ratio, but he's not kicked on quite the same level as you thought that he might have maybe a year ago,
Yeah, and with Envoy, and the thing that always surprises me, he's got such a brilliant record around Down Royal. And then you look at Kempton, which I'd have thought is a relatively similar kind of flat right-handed track, and yet he doesn't seem to turn up at all when he goes over there.
The one thing I'll say about Down Royal is, yes, it's right-handed, it's quite flat, but it's a huge galloping circuit. If you had to take, I remember there was a Christmas quiz one time, and one of the questions was, which has got the biggest circuit in Ireland? And I think Down Royal is very, very close to it, because it's at least 1.6 miles. So it's a huge galloping track. Whereas Kempton is very, very tight. I was in Kempton a couple of times, and it is incredibly tight. You have to travel and jump. Just don't know whether that will suit Envoy Ellen, but sure, maybe they'll have another go, Cheveley Park, but I don't think so.
No, you'd like to think he'll be heading back to the Ryanair, even though he'll have his work cut up against him at the age he is. Found a 50, won the Grade 2 chase on the same day. Now, I must say, I was a little bit snippy about Found a 50 last year. I was very impressed, beating a race-fit horse in Pinkerton, who's a pretty good horse, a Galway Plate winner at that. And he won pretty comprehensively at the death.
He did. He won 2 1/4 lengths, giving him a stone. He was excellent. His jumping is superb. I'd imagine that he has huge options in terms of trip. Gordon said afterwards, 2.5, maybe drop down to 2. I could see him. He's 14-1 to the Ryanair, which seems more than fair. I would love to see him in next year's King George.
Yes.
I think there's lots of examples of horses that are 2.5 milers can go well in the King George. He will travel strongly. He jumps really well. Just because he hasn't gone over 3 miles yet. A little like, say, LT Tomp, Banbridge did once. We might talk about them later on. But just because you haven't run over 3 miles doesn't mean you can't stay. But he's a lovely horse. Where Gordon's, he said afterwards he could be tricky to place. He might go to the John Durkin next, etc. But it'd be interesting, I think, if he ends up maybe the King George in 13 months' time.
Yeah, he's slightly tricky because he won 2 Grade 1s last year going left-handed, but yet does have that inclination to jump out to his right slightly.
Yeah, he's won plenty of race at this stage, so I wouldn't have a huge worry about that. He's a very, very solid horse, that's for sure.
Yeah, the big hurdle race on the Friday was won by Brighter Days Ahead. Look, a mare with an incredibly tall reputation, beating King of Kingsfield. She was only workmanlike over 2 miles, but you'd think 2 miles on goodish ground at Down Royal would be a very much at the minimum of her stamina requirements.
Yeah, well, we saw that last year. She got tapped for toe in the mare's hurdle. Then at Aintree, she was excellent. I think 2.5 miles on soft ground was her cup of tea. I personally couldn't give her any chance in a champion hurdle unless some of the others maybe didn't appear through injury. But I'd imagine, Gordon's mentioned it afterwards, and since then he says, we'll see, he might chicken out a week to go. I'd imagine she'll definitely run the mare's hurdle. You could do Lossiemouth on it, and perhaps the following year if you wanted to go either over fences for a champion. But I couldn't see her win the champion hurdle. But I think if Lossiemouth doesn't appear in the mare's hurdle, she definitely go off 6-4, 2-1 shot in the mare's hurdle. She looks a lovely mare. She made a mistake at the last. She was giving weight, I think, 6 pounds to King of Kingsfield. So it was a very, very good run. Daddy Longlegs jumped poorly. A very, very nice run, but I'd say mare's hurdle is the way to go with her.
Yeah, you'd like to think so. The one thing I can't quite get my head around with Brighter Days Ahead is just how bullish Gordon is about this mare. It very much feels kind of Apple's Jade vibes with him. And as much as she's been awfully impressive, maybe Aintree aside, she hasn't necessarily delivered quite as much on the track as maybe the word of bullishness has been given to her.
Yeah, I suppose the fact that she's so well related, she was expensive, she's always looked excellent. She's related to Caldwell Potter and Mighty Potter, etc. The vibes you get is that in her work at home, that her work is always amazing. And I suppose when you're seeing that every morning, that can maybe taint your view of a horse. She's excellent. As you said, it was surprising that people complain about the tactics in Cheltenham that went too slow, etc. She hasn't maybe quite lived up to the huge billing. Like if she ran against Lossiemouth over 2.5 miles or 2-2 on soft ground, I'd imagine Lossiemouth would be 2s on, and I couldn't see brighter days ahead this season beating Lossiemouth anyway.
But I would find it very hard to believe that Brighter Days Ahead is in any way quicker than Lossiemouth from what we've seen thus far. Maybe, we'll see more speed in time, but she does look an out and out 2.5 mile, if not potentially a 3 mile horse in time.
Yeah, she could, and it'll be interesting if she did win a Mayor's Hurdle. If Lossiemouth went to the champion, would she go over fences next year? And I guarantee you, that beginner's chase at Down Royal could be her starting point next season, and she could probably. I don't see why she wouldn't end up at 3 miles. Yeah, she a lovely mare, but at the top of the tree, Lossiemouth will be ahead of her at the minute.
Gordon won the 2 maiden hurdles with the Yellow Clay on the Friday. The Romeo Coolio won the 2 mile race on the Saturday. Personally, for me, Romeo Coolio certainly travels and he jumped like a classy horse. The Yellow Clay also did very impressively. I'm a little more lukewarm about him. Romeo Coolio was very impressive. You think the Royal Bond's probably the next starting point for him?
Yeah, I'd say so. Romeo Coolio for me. I've seen videos of you in bars dancing and being a bit keen and being a bit.
I wish you hadn't.
Being a bit immature, and I was too. Don't worry, but being a bit keen and a bit whatever. Yeah. So I'm comparing you to Romeo Coolio last year. And now that you've I'm only joking. But Romeo Coolio last year was very much immature, was way too keen at Cheltenham and at Punchestown, etc. The thing I loved the other day was the way he settled so really well in an ordinary. It was a poor maiden hurdle. He went off. What did he go off? 4 to 11 or even shorter, 2 to 13. And I thought it was a very good performance. I think he'll win the Royal Bond. What will be in the Royal Bond is the next question. Maybe Bleu de Vassy and horses like that, but I'd be hopeful that Romeo Coolio would win that. The Yellow Clay was a very good bumper horse last season, caught everybody's eye at Leopardstown, was a little bit unlucky. Kept very, very good company. Good horse. Second redemption day at Punchestown. It was interesting that he started over whatever was 2 mile 6. I think Gordon says he's going to go back to the 2.5 mile novice hurdle in Navan. I'm sure he'd probably be favoured for that because with the good ground at the minute, I think the fields and the standard is just a little below top class at the moment. So where do you think the Yellow Clay could end up? Perhaps in the Gallagher's maybe, but...
Yeah, I think it'll be very hard to sum up where, just how far up the ladder he'll go, because you'd think he'd take an awful lot of beating in a grade 2. Like there's a small part of my mind kind of thinking, would they even contemplate campaigning him like they did Better Days Ahead last year, and he'd suddenly turn up in a Martin Pipe off top race. I'd give him more chance of winning a race like that than I would a grade 1 at Cheltenham. But I suppose based off his bumper form, it's going to be very difficult to do that to the assessor.
I don't know how they'll get him into a Martin Pipe, but anyway.
No, with great difficulty, I suspect.
I think he'd want a few P's in front of him before that would happen. But the Yellow Clay, he'll end up in the Gallagher's. I'm sure he'll be 10 to 1 shot on the day, perhaps.
Yeah, we'll move on to the beginner's chase, which was won by Firefox. Obviously, a race that Gordon has farmed in recent years with pretty much his best novice chaser for the season coming up. He won it with plenty of decent horses. Firefox won it. I think Gordon said himself in an interview the other day that he felt that Firefox had the toughest assignment of all of them. Usually the horse goes off 6-7 to 1 on in this race, but yet he had Mossy Fen Park, who had some good form. And I liked Mossy Fen Park back in second, I must say. But I thought Firefox was very good. Would he go to a Drinmore, would you say, next, in the mould of plenty of those horses?
Yeah, or he could go to the Drinmore, or perhaps he might go to Limerick at Christmas. It depends what winners Gordon has over the next little while, etc. Where will he run them all? He was very, very good. He jumped superbly. Mossy Fen Park beat him by 3.5 lengths. I thought he ran a cracker as well. The two of them jumped brilliantly, but you'd want the two of them beating big stage by that far, to be honest. And the horse back and forth, no time to wait. He was very good. He's only 6 to 1 for the Arkle. To me, that looks a dot short. I think me and you were chatting earlier that In the Pocket in Wexford was a horse that I think he's up to around the same quality as a Firefox. Yeah. Obviously, Firefox was unlucky last year, Supreme, etc. He's a very, very good horse. Nothing wrong with him whatsoever. You'd love to own him, but 6 to 1 for an Arkle might just seem a little short at the minute.
Yeah, no, I'd say so. At what stage, when you're looking at whether it be novice hurdlers with the likes of a Romeo Coolio or the novice chasers, like what stage are you beginning to make a real kind of picture in your head? You know, I assume you have to wait to see what all the Mullen sources out around Christmas time before you can even kind of think of divulging into those markets.
Yeah, I suppose with the novice hurdlers, a lot of the ones that will end up fancied on the day we haven't heard yet. It just depends on prices. I thought 12-1 Romeo Coolio the day after the weekend was decent value. The good thing, I suppose, with the novice chases is that every horse that'll end up at Cheltenham, we already know them. We've seen them run over hurdles. It's very unlikely that a horse will come from France, perhaps, that has won over there and will end up a single figure price for a novice chase. It doesn't. I can't remember the last time it happened. So all the ones that'll end up in the Arkle, what used to be the Turners and now the Brown Advisory as well. Like we've seen all them run before. So if you wanted to back one of those that jumps really well, sure. If you're getting the right price, I wouldn't stop you.
Do you feel there will be a certain bracket of horse that will end up not now going to Cheltenham? That kind of horse that's in a rock and a hard place between trips and they'll just save for Fairyhouse or Aintree over 2.5?
There could, if you've got a horse that's say a 2.5 miler, but also if you feel that he's not quite up to taking on, a Ballyburn or a Firefox or in the pocket in an Arkle. If you think he's like a 150 horse or 155 horse, you might say to yourself, look, I have a better chance of winning a grade 1 at Aintree or perhaps at Fairyhouse. So, and then if the Turners was still there and you did run him in the Turners and he was a 12 or 14 to 1 shot, like 12 or 14 to 1 shots win Turners, you never know. It's not always the favourite that wins. So I think it's a pity they got rid of the Turners personally. I think it was a perfect race for a horse who's a classy hurdler that might end up being a staying chaser, because I don't think the trainers particularly like the Brown Advisory personally. But
well, yeah, like you look at a Ballyburn, for instance, and kind of all the talk quite a lot of the time has been about this horse being a potential Gold Cup horse.
Yeah.
You would think if he does go over fences this year, he will end up in an Arkle. I understand maybe back in the Quarto Star days, it was a little bit easier, to go from 2 miles up to 3 miles, up to 3 mile 2 in the Gold Cup, but it's not done anywhere near as often these days. And it would be some ask for the horse if he was to win an Arkle to actually graduate into being a Gold Cup horse.
Yeah, there's plenty of examples of Kicking King and Kicking King years ago and War of Attrition. But I think, personally speaking, Ballyburn definitely would have ended up in the Turners if it was still there. And I think Willie likes that race. He's shown I like him for before. Fair enough. He did win the Brown Advisory last year, but I don't think that was Willie's first choice for which race to run Fact to File. And I think if he had his way, he might have run it in the Turners. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I wouldn't say Willie is too happy. And like if you look at the record of winners and horse that ran in the Brown Advisory, it's not always an easy race to recover from. It's a bit like the Albert Bartlett for a novice hurdler. It's just a bit of a grueler, isn't it? And with the future in mind, I suppose a lot of trainers will look at Fairyhouse Aintree or the Arkle if you've got a really good novice hurdler going chasing. Yeah, so it's a pity, but that's the way it goes.
And talking just last point on races that have been omitted, we must mention In the Pocket again. Obviously, incredibly impressive down at Wexford, beating Farron Glory. Farron Glory was drunk in the final furlong by the looks of things, having tried to go within the pocket. You'd have thought in times gone by that race on Stephen's Day at Leopardstown would be absolutely tailor-made for the horse, but it's no longer there. It's gone missing in action.
Yeah, it's gone completely. It's not even downgraded to a grade 2 or 3. It's gone. So where Henry said the other day he has to go left-handed, so he's not going to go to Limerick. And he said, we'll have to look and see what race we can come up with. We were chatting earlier and you mentioned that there's a race on, what do you call the day in Naas, early January.
Lawler's and Naas Day.
Lawler's and Naas Day, yeah. And there's a race there. There's a 2 mile novice chase that Appreciate, as you said, 1 or 2 years ago. Last year, the race was called off with the fog, was it? And then Quilixios won the rearranged race. But that's for horses who are EBF eligible. So I don't know if In the Pocket or whatever is EBF eligible. But if he is, maybe he'll go there. But perhaps they might have to look at a race in England or whatever. But it'd be nice for In the Pocket's connections if there was a race between now and the Irish Arkle. And for it to be its 3rd run and the Arkle at Cheltenham to be the 4th run be ideal. But now that the race in Leopardstown's gone, yeah, they've a tricky decision to make.
Yeah, it's difficult. Even the Grade One in England before Christmas time is the Henry VIII around Sandown, which is again right-handed, so that wouldn't suit. We'll move on to looking at Naas on Sunday. There's the Fishery Lane Hurdle, the Brown Lad. It's obviously the Barbastrein Castle Chase, which we'll get to in a minute. Fishery Lane Hurdle has obviously been won by plenty of decent horses in the past. Gavin, I'm not so sure we're seeing a superstar there on Sunday. Only the 6 entries. Looks like Zarigan for Mick Alford and Tracy Collins will take a fair bit of beating, but hard to know where he's going to end up come the end of the season.
Yeah, like previous winners included Jesky, Diakali, Esper Dalen, and went on to bolt up in the champion hurdle, Tiupu, etc. So there has been some great winners this race. One thing I'll say about Naas on Sunday is that, for example, Willie Mullins, as you know, Andrew, the weather is incredibly dry. Everybody's lawns are looking fantastic, which is great, but horse trainers are pulling whatever hair they've left out. And yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, because I looked at the forecast yesterday, and for the next 10 days, there's no rain.
No.
So Willie Mullins just won't do fast work with these horses. So I can't see him having that many runners in November if the rain stays away. For example, last year at this meeting in Naas, he had plenty of runners. He had 2 winners. He won with Dino Blue, and he also won the bumper with Fura Fusil. Some of the others didn't run well, and that'll happen with Willie in November. Lots of his won't run well because they're not fit yet. But this Sunday, for example, in Naas, he's only got 2 entries. So that'll tell you that he's certainly behind schedule, which is not his fault, and he's right to be patient. But I'd say he'd love to do the rain dance at the moment. Zarigan, as you said, has to give away £4 to Pinot Gris, who's a very nice horse for Gavin Cromwell. One leg, won an ordinary race in Roscommon. You've got Palaman for Paul Nolan, that ran in the Boodles last year. Look, Zarigan, 2 from 2 over hurdles. The farm got a bit of a boost from Listowel with the horse Gaucher winning since. Only has to give away £4 to horses rated 123 and 121. Will be a sharp price favourite, but you imagine he should win, yeah.
Yeah, you'd like to think so. The Brown Lad, again, just because of the ground, you'd think it certainly hasn't got the same amount of entries that you'd come to expect. You probably wouldn't be going far wrong with the first and second from last year in Espinito Bello and Guay Cool in what looks an ordinary enough race, I'd have thought.
It is, yeah. Espinito Bello, I think, is £9 higher. And Gaith Cool, who won since, I think, at Leopardstown last Christmas, is £13 higher. So Espinito Bello, even though he won the race last year, is actually £4 better off with Gaith Cool. They've both had a recent run, one over fences, one on the flat. Win some, lose some for Porrick Roach. Took a while to get there in Clonmel, but in the end, won snug enough. He'd have a chance, but he's up to 124. Dame Rapide ran the other day, but you're not sure exactly what's going to turn up. For example, Pinot Gris, that we mentioned, of Gavin Cromwell's, as a double entry. So look, normally the Brown Lad is a really, really good handicap hurdle. This year, the standard is a bit lower, but yeah, last year's race and also that horse Porrick Roaches will be towards the top of the market, I'd say.
How would you go about assessing with this type of ground, like even just from a day-to-day punting perspective? Like, do you find at this time of the year when it's better ground that you have less bets?
You probably should have. I got caught out. I backed a horse there on Sunday in Cork. Loved the profile, loved its last run, won on soft ground. And then I thought it had some okay form and decent ground. I backed it and it ran poorly. And then afterwards, you're saying to yourself, you shouldn't have backed it. You know, that's just the way it goes. So you have to be fussy about ground. Also, what's a bit of a guessing game at the moment, depending on which stable is, which ones are fit, if they've had a run or not. I think you're 8 times out of 10, you're better off to wait and let a horse run and back it second time, perhaps. But for example, as I said to you, I think Willie Mullins will have a quiet November, but that's just down to the ground.
Yeah, because I know we obviously put up a tweet the other day looking for a couple of questions for you, and I know a fair few people were looking for potentially a few golden rules when it comes to punting. I know you're big on writing down your bets, getting a spreadsheet, seeing kind of where you're going right and wrong. But does that differ? I know that won't differ no matter what time you are in the year. But would your punting strategy at all change as the season progresses?
It would. If I'd be betting smaller now than I will be, say, in another month. If the ground ends up soft and all the horses have had a run, I think that's the time to get stuck in. But I think for the next month, It's easier said than done, but we should try and restrain from betting. You should have your limits anyway, but keeping a record and keeping your P&L, all that, that's absolutely fundamental. If you can't do that, I think there's no point in lying to yourself. And if you can prove to yourself, you can win a few quid away with you. But yeah, I think from maybe another month, and once horses have had a run, I think then you can, from then up till maybe the end of March, and then once you get to Fairy House at Easter, it starts to get tricky again because the ground gets good again. And then Punchestown's a bit of a hit and miss for me, so I tend to give it a break then.
Yeah, very good. Look, the best race on Sunday is that Barbarastown Castle Chase, and it's being circulated by the return of Marine Nationale. Unbeaten up until the Irish Arkle, were disappointing back in 5th, then had a bit of a setback, missed the Arkle, haven't seen him since. Where do you stand with Marine Nationale? He doesn't seem to, there's very few people that sit on the fence. You're either, when you look at Twitter, people are either incredibly with him or incredibly against him.
I'm against him, sorry to say. I know...
You're killing me here.
You should be wearing your Barry Connell scarf. But,
I should.
But yeah, I'd be against him. Obviously, the good ground at the weekend will help him. The fact that he wore a tongue tie the last twice for me is a negative. We didn't see him since. Fantastic talent. To do what he did in the Supreme was really special. And even first time over fence, he was very good. The next day, obviously, he wasn't. And I'd have to watch him. Yeah, I don't think Barry Connell's horse are in amazing form. He's had some winners, but he's not banging in the winners. And yeah, I'd be watching. I don't really like laying horses in races. It's against my
you prefer backing winners than laying horses?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a negative thing or something. I don't really do it, but I'd love to. I just don't know whether Hercule Desoy, who loved the good ground, he has to give weight away on Sunday. I just don't know whether he's going to be fully fit coming from Willie's at the moment. Perhaps he will be, but that's a bit of a guess. Quilixios will be fit, you'd imagine, because Henry's are on fire. Yeah. They're in super form along with Gordon's. So perhaps he obviously won that Novice Chase we mentioned last year at Naas. You've got Zana here in there. He's a funny fish. You don't know whether he's a 2 miler, a 2.5 miler, or a 3 miler.
Don't think he knows himself, to be honest.
I think somebody should tell him. But I'd be definitely against Marine Nationale, whether it's fair on the horse or not. But I'd like to back something in the race to win it.
Well,
what do you think?
Yeah, what I would find odd, and I think Barry Connell's going to skirt it around it a little bit, is that he won the Supreme. We then didn't see him between March and December, and then he suddenly had a wind operation and has a tongue tie when he won his beginners at Leopardstown. And I'm there going, geez, I couldn't tell you the last time the Supreme Novices winner has had a wind up before its next start. Usually that's a fair sign that you're in pretty rude health. So
yes.
When he's pushed on it, he just said, "Oh no, there's nothing wrong with his wind." And I don't buy into the people that are looking at his head carriage, going, "Oh, it's a little bit high." It's always been a relatively proud head carriage he's had, but at the same time, you're not giving a wind operation to a horse that can breathe perfectly.
No, you're not. You're not. At the top level, you can't have many things wrong with you to produce the goods. And for him to do it in the Supreme on soft ground against Facile Vega, and then, as you said, had the wind up and the tongue tie, maybe he'll win on Sunday, but not for me. And I can see his season gradually getting worse, perhaps, but I'd be against him on Sunday.
Yeah, I wouldn't be backing him on Sunday myself. My view is that I think he'll actually win on Sunday, but I'm not sure he'll almost win another race all year. He could win on Sunday, everyone thinks he's back, and then he's going to have to run in the Grade 1 at Christmas time. He's going to have to run against an Energumene or an El Fabiolo. And I'd just be struggling to think, he'll be able to see which way they go. It does obviously open up that Champion Chase debate. It's a very odd division at the moment. Captain Guinness obviously won the race last year. You'd be disappointed if he was winning the race again. To be honest, you were a little bit disappointed he won the race last year. But where would you stand on that? You've obviously an Energumene coming back, but he's old. El Fabiolo blotted his copybook a few times last year. It's a bit of a head scratcher.
It is. You've also, recently these famous stable tours, which are a very, very limited guide. But El Fabiolo, perhaps he might step up and trip to the Ryanair because they reckon that if he goes slower, it'll help his jumping, which fell apart twice last year. We're going to talk about the King George, and Gaelic Warrior for me will be the one that deserves to be favoured for the champion chase. He was electric in the Arkle when a lot of people thought he couldn't go left-handed, which was incorrect. Is he going to go to the King George? I don't know. I'm not sure if he will or not. Perhaps Willie might rely on LT Tomp, we'll see. But he's not going to win a champion chase. But I think Gaelic Warrior at 4-1, I think he deserves to be favoured for the champion chase. I prefer the younger horses coming up. Energumene, he won 2 champion chases. You could say that 1 or 2 of those fell apart a little bit. We've actually had a number of champion chases in the last 5 or 10 years that have fallen apart on the day. Remember when Shishkin pulled up? There was other races there where was it Deafy Decide didn't win at odds on? And
yeah. Well, I remember the first time I went to the festival was that year, and it was billed as being the race of the week. LTR versus Deafy Decide versus Chacun Poursois.
Yeah.
LTR didn't run. I think he had a setback. Chacun Poursois had a stone bruise on the day, and then Deafy Decide got turned over at 4s on or something. It was an absolute disaster.
Yeah. So, and the same happened in the champion hurdle around that time as well, with 3 2-1 shots, sort of. Yeah. But yeah, the champion chase can fall apart. But I think Gaelic Warrior, now, if he goes to a King George, it'd be an interesting preparation for a champion chase. He'd want to be another Cato Star for that sort of thing. But yeah, I think, okay, he got beat in Punchestown at the end of a long season. But he's an amazing horse. Like, he has won over 3 miles as well. Could he end up in a Gold Cup someday? Who knows? But he probably deserves to be favoured for the champion chase. And whether he goes for the King George or not, who knows?
Well, that brings us on to the King George, where the initial entries, I suppose, the 2-month away entries came out there yesterday. Fast or Slow, who'd been backed into 4-1 for the race, wasn't in the entries, which was an awful shock to many. I hope there hasn't been a setback there. If Gaelic Warrior was to turn up, I'd have thought he was the likeliest winner of the race. Like, he's just a horse of, as you said, of extreme ability. Now, sometimes you don't know what side of the bed he's going to wake up on, but when he's right, he is an excellent horse.
He is, yeah. His chase debut last year, around this time last year in Punchestown, was absolutely electric. Like, the best I've seen in a beginner's chase in the last 10 years was Galloping des Champs in Leopardstown. But I'd say Gaelic Warrior's win in Punchestown was the second best I've seen in a beginner's chase. It was exceptional. And we all know that he goes right-handed. He won over 3 miles in Punchestown a couple of seasons back. I think if he does go to the King George, I think he'll go off favourite and it'll be very difficult to beat. LA Francais is favourite at the moment, but that's because I suppose people don't know whether Gaelic Warrior is going to show up. And you have the conundrum as well about fitness. There's not a chance Willie will send him to the King George unless he feels that he's fully fit. And also, it'll be interesting to see what horses Willie runs in the John Dorkin. Is he going to be able to get Galloping des Champs out in that race this year? I think he might struggle with that just with fitness, but we'll see. If Gaelic Warrior doesn't go, I think that I'd love to see LT Tomp and Banbridge running the race. Yeah. They're both more 2.5 mile horses, we'll say. At least Banbridge has won around Kempton before over 2.5. But there are examples of horses that are 2.5 milers that can run a cracker in the King George. The 2 things you have to do is you have to jump really well because it's lickety split. I remember I went over one Christmas and my brother's horse ran in it, Rule Supreme, in the Cato Star Novice chase, and he was out with the wash and he couldn't handle the place at all. And he went on to win the RSA at the time, So it's a very tight track. It would suit LT Tomp, but it'd suit Banbridge. They're both 14-1 at the minute. I think they'd have a squeak, but it depends on Gaelic Warrior. Who do you like in it?
Very hard. I'd be a huge Gaelic Warrior fan. I can see the case definitely with Banbridge, especially considering it's never usually too deep around Kempton, and then you just like that little bit of nicer ground. Ilete Tompla, I've got egg in my face plenty of times with him. I just can't.
So have I.
I can't have him as being a proper Grade 1 horse, and yet he keeps winning Grade 1s. I keep taking him on. Like, I just he's won around Leopardstown more times than I can count, and yet every time he goes back, I'm there trying to find a reason to take him on.
I'm actually trying to think, have I ever backed Ilete Tomp a winner?
I certainly haven't.
I backed him in the Supreme there a couple of years back, and he got a terrible, terrible ride from Danny. He was out the outside and things like that. But he's an interesting horse. Like, he's not big. He doesn't look like a chaser, that's for sure. And his jumping is good, and he's a battler. He loves a battle. He was questioned a couple of years ago about whether he had the attitude for it, but he loves a battle, and he's got a good record in the finish. He, as we know, beat Gaelic Warrior at Punchtown, so he's he's a reluctant. We have to eventually give in to the fact that he is a Grade 1 horse, and he's better than we all think. So I'd love to see him in the King George, but he'd have to jump well, and I'd love to see Banbridge in it. I'd love to see 10, 12, 14 horses in the King George. I'd hate to see if it was only a 7-runner race, but all eyes would be on whether Gaelic Warrior ends up. Obviously, I would think that Gallopin Deschamps is 10-1 for it. He has no chance of showing up in the King George.
No, it's the last race of the entire calendar that Gallopin Deschamps is going to turn up in, I'd have thought, out of all those staying chases.
And also, you're going to have Hewick in it, maybe, or maybe he won't. He might go to Leopardstown. Shark said the other day he has to decide that. Violin, and so yeah, look, it's the best race at Christmas time, and I'd love to see loads of them in it.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit surprised with it, actually, Tom, considering I believe he's a 3-time Grade 1 winner at Leopardstown. Absolutely loves the place. I understand that it's obviously a rock and a hard place, but I'm a little bit surprised that he wouldn't be running in the 2 Mile 1 Open Grade 1 there, because he's kind of spoiled the Christmas party plenty of times before. He certainly spoiled my Christmas party, being a second fav and beating Mullen's favourite. So it doesn't really, it kind of causes a bit of concern to me why they wouldn't almost run where they know he's going to run very well.
Yeah, well, I suppose you're going to have maybe Energamine in the Hilly Way, and then either Gaelic Warrior or Elatia Tomp will go for what used to be the Paddy Power Dial-A-Bet at Christmas, as you said. Yeah. And maybe the other one then might go to Kempton. But again, it'll be down to fitness. I'd say, Willie has 150 superstars. It'll be very interesting when it gets to Christmas. He'll have to run 2 or 3 or 4 in maiden hurdles, perhaps, because he's going to run out of races. But he desperately needs a bit of rain. But sure, that's the same for everybody.
Well, yeah, it definitely is. So hopefully we can get a bit of rain in the next couple of weeks and we can see some of these horses out. Gavin, it's been fantastic to have you on. Just as a final thing, looking back at our Down Royal review there of all those Gordon horses, if you were to take one forward and maybe let one go, as it were, or be against one, what one would you really be keen on for the season ahead, and what one would you maybe be a little bit more lukewarm?
I'd be slightly against the 2 bumper winners. I don't think they're up to the top class. Really nice horses. Again, I'm sure they cost a lot of money. You'd love to own them. They'll win plenty of races. They might win another bumper. They might go hurdling. The one on the second day is only a 4-year-old, so maybe they'll give it a season in bumpers. I'd be very surprised if either of those 2 won the Cheltenham bumper. There's lots more to come out in the meantime. I want to take home with you. I suppose it's very hard to be against Found of 50. And I'd have a soft spot for your disco buddy, Romeo Coolio.
Well, if only I had a tenth of the ability of Romeo Coolio, I'd be very, very
That's your new nickname. Your new nickname was Romeo Coolio.
That is the hope. Anyway, Gavin, it's been fantastic to have you on. Thanks for your time. I really do appreciate it. I'm sure you're doing plenty with your members at the moment. If you want to give that a bit of a plug.
Yeah, sure. It's busy now. It's starting. It's 5 videos a week. Horses to note, a Cheltenham video each week, and then a weekend preview, and then there's a daily preview Saturday and Sunday with a few tips. So it's the 3rd year of it. It's going grand. It's going well. So happy enough, and it keeps a fella busy.
Yeah, very much. We'll have the link to that down below in the description. Make sure to like and subscribe to the video if you did enjoy it. 500 likes would be fantastic. If you can subscribe, if you did enjoy, to get us towards that 20,000 mark, it would be awfully appreciated. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Andrew.